Hey, so a couple days ago, I made a video all about rhythm guitar techniques. And in that video, I mentioned that I use very, very thick picks. So specifically, I use these picks from Chicken Picks, and it's 2.5 millimeters. These are very, very thick picks by most people's standards. And I saw a couple comments from people mentioning that they can't really play rhythm guitar with a really thick pick. And I think a lot of people, typically guitar teachers, will recommend that when you play especially like more complicated rhythmic patterns, that you should switch to a thinner pick. However, for me, I actually never change off of this pick. So even if I were to play some spikier rhythms, so what I wanted to do in this video is show you my technique for using a thicker pick to play rhythm stuff like this. And the reason for that is because a lot of you guys might want to use a thicker pick when you are playing lead stuff, but then you feel like you got to go to that thinner pick to play some of the spankier rhythm stuff, where the reality is it's all just going to come down to your technique. So the main issue that people run into is when they hold their pick, they stick it out from their fingers between their first finger and their thumb, and they basically hold it perfectly horizontal to the strings. And then what happens is as you pick through your strings, the pick gives to the string. So it bends, essentially allowing the pick to play through the string and move on to the next string without breaking the string. The problem is that if your pick is very thick and hard, like this one, it won't do that. So if I were to hold my pick perfectly straight on with the strings like this, so if the strings are sitting like this and my pick is coming in at a direct right angle, the pick is going to meet the string and it's not going to be able to get through. So we don't want that. So what we have to do is we actually have to angle our pick. And this is a trick that a ton of really great shredders use for picking through scales and things like that, because what it does is when you learn to angle your pick as you move it, it allows the pick to stay out of the way of the adjacent strings. Now, we're obviously not going to be working on that technique here. What we're going to do instead is focus more on how it works with strumming. But the actual challenge in this technique is not just learning how to angle your pick, because obviously if you angle your pick downwards, well, now it's going to glide over the strings, no problem. But what about when you come back up? Now we're angled against our strings. Coming up, we can't do that. So we have to angle it the other way. And learning how to switch back and forth between these two angles is really tough to do. It's a tiny little fine motor skill that you have to learn how to do because it's not coming really from the wrist. So this technique, I'm going to show you in this camera. Essentially what I am doing with my pick is typically your pick is facing like this, right? Perfectly horizontal, and you're going down the strings like this. We don't want to do that. If we had a thin pick, that would be fine because the pick would give way and would have no problem getting through all the strings. But what we need to do is when we play down, we need to angle our pick like this. It's not a huge angle, it's just a little bit. And then when we come up, same thing, not a huge angle, just a little bit. And if you take a look at my thumb and my finger, and this is basically what this whole video is about, it's this technique. Basically what I'm doing is rolling the pick from side to side. So I'm using my thumb and mostly my first finger, and I'm just kind of doing a little twist. So as I'm going down, up, down, up, down, up. And as you get better at this, it's a little hard because I'm holding my arm out straight. If it's closer, it's a little bit more natural for me. But basically what you're going to be doing is as you're playing, you're essentially doing this. So you're doing that little push-pull with your pick as you're playing up and down. And the better you get at this, like I said, it's a very, very small movement. I'm really not angling it that much. I'm only angling it about that much and that much. It's not huge. And what's happening is I'm making that angle as I'm playing down. And obviously it's hard to see when you're looking at it this way, but as I go down, it's being angled down. And as I come up, it goes back. And so it's a combination of my picking technique coming from my arm, so that nice loose wrist. And I think looseness is the key word here because as you can see, I'm actually even letting the strings do a little bit of the work for me. So I don't have to actively push it over like that, push it over like that. As I hit the strings, because I'm not squeezing super hard to try and keep the pick in its position, it's going to naturally just push my pick down like this, right? As I'm coming down onto the string like that, it's going to push my pick down like that. And then as I come up, it's the same thing. It's going to push my pick down, and I'm just going to let it do that. Because if my wrist was quite rigid and I was squeezing quite hard on my pick, well, then that's when I'm going to start getting caught up in my strings. But with this thicker pick, if I'm letting the strings do the work for me, and then I'm just making those tiny little adjustments with my fingers, which honestly, they're kind of getting forced into that position anyway as I pick, well, the pick's going to stay out of the way. As it goes down, and as it goes up, they're just gonna glide over the strings. And when I close my eyes as I'm doing this technique and I really pay attention to how it feels, I really am letting the strings do a lot of that work. The fingers are moving, but I'm kind of just letting them move as I'm gliding over the strings. And as a result, my whole wrist is moving, my whole arm is moving. So as I strum down, we go the one way. As we strum up, the whole hand is kind of moving. And again, just using that resistance from the strings to put my hand in the correct position. All with this super thick pick, I'm having no issue whatsoever. So then what that allows me to have is the advantages of having a thick pick. So when I want to play single note runs, it's no big deal, and I don't have to switch my pick when I want to switch back to rhythm. Because as a performing guitar player, you don't really get that luxury. A lot of times you're switching very quickly back and forth between playing a rhythm guitar part or doing something funky, and then all of a sudden you're playing a lead lick and going back and forth, and obviously playing lead licks with a really soft pick feels terrible in my opinion. So what you need to do to practice this is sit in front of the TV, sit in front of your computer, whatever, your phone, watch YouTube, do whatever, even scroll TikTok, whatever you like to do. And while you're doing that, have your hand with your pick in it up against the guitar, and you do want to use a thick pick. I would say, when I say thick pick, I'm talking about like 1 millimeter and thicker. I'm not talking about 2.5. This is ridiculous. A lot of people aren't going to want to use something this thick, but it definitely applies with a 1 mil thick pick. And just sit there and just let your pick glide over. Just mute your strings like I'm right here. And all we're doing is practicing letting our pick glide back and forth. And like I said, really feeling the resistance and letting our whole hand move as it touches the strings. And then eventually you can kind of get faster. Like I said, it feels very floppy, really floppy. The strings are providing just enough resistance to push the pick in the direction I want. So again, angling it downwards as I go down, and then angling upwards as I come up. And just like with any other guitar technique, it's about building muscle memory. So if you just sit there and you do this every night for 5 or 10 minutes or longer, if you can handle it, and you just go back, forth, back, forth, back and forth, then in the future, when you're strumming and you're playing guitar, you're gonna naturally start doing it without even thinking. There are a whole bunch of these little nuances, especially with people that have been playing guitar for a really long time, that you don't even notice that you've built up. This wasn't something that I ever noticed about my guitar playing until I really started paying attention to it. And even that comment that one fella made on that video just made me start thinking about it. It's like, oh, I really do angle my pick. And then I kind of was able to break it down, but it wasn't something that I knew. I was just subconsciously doing it. Instead of accidentally discovering this technique by yourself, you're gonna put yourself way ahead by actually learning this technique early. One of the hardest things to do as a guitar player is break old habits. So if you set this habit in motion as early as possible, then you're not gonna be stuck in a different picking or strumming technique that you're gonna have to spend months or even years breaking down. Okay, so I know that wasn't much, but that's all I wanted to cover in this video. If you have any questions, make sure you leave them below the video. I'll make sure to answer them for you. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.